Former Trump critic and current Trump sycophant, Marco Rubio, demonstrated a dangerous hypocrisy when he went on the Fox propaganda network to whine about Trump's indictment during the arraignment. Intrigued? Then click that like and subscribe and enjoy the video. So as I've mentioned before, shamelessness is one of the Republican Party's superpowers. It enables them, despite the fact that they are fewer in number, despite the fact that their policies and their values are considerably less popular, it enables them to punch well above their weight class because they can pivot ruthlessly from point to point to point and standard to standard to standard, policy to policy to policy, whatever they need to. They can say one thing for convenience on Monday, say something else completely different, mutually exclusive even, on Wednesday, return to the original Monday position on Friday, and then come up with a third one by the end of the week. That is one of the animating principles of the Republican Party, their complete lack of principle. And we've seen it get worse over time, and the Democratic Party, for all its faults, demonstrates nowhere near as consistent or as egregious that level of hypocrisy, and they police it within their own ranks considerably more than the GOP does in theirs. So Democrats, for the most part, feel a need to remain relatively consistent with their beliefs and their policy because they know they'll be called out for it by the media, by the public, and by fellow Democrats as well. Republicans are unburdened with that. They don't have to worry about that. And so it enables them to be so profoundly dangerous in a system which advantages them so clearly in so many different ways. And unfortunately, for that reason, sometimes I question the utility of pointing out the numerous, the infinite, the everlasting instances of hypocrisy from members of this party, because to their base, the conservative base, they don't care, right? The conservative base at this point is animated just to crush the libs. They want to own the libs so bad that they will sell their soul to Donald Trump. And eventually, if somebody comes along that they think is better than Trump or could feed them the victory they need who isn't Trump, they'll turn on Trump the way that they did on Mitt Romney, on John McCain, on George W. Bush, on whoever it is. It's just unfortunately how the conservative movement works. There's no continuity, no consistency in that respect. And we saw during last month's or the month before CNN town hall with Donald Trump, we saw his audience, his conservative Republican audience, applaud him for publicly admitting his hypocrisy. Remember, it was during the debt ceiling negotiations, and it was before the deal was finalized between President Biden and Speaker McCarthy. And Donald Trump said, look, when I was president, I said that nobody should use the debt ceiling as a negotiating wedge. Now that I'm not president, I am demanding that my party use the debt ceiling as a negotiating wedge. And when CNN host Caitlin Collins called him out for it, okay, well, what's the difference? He shrugged and said, I'm not president anymore. And his audience laughed and applauded. They love the hypocrisy. They love that he doesn't feel weakly shackled to principle and consistency, that he'll do or say whatever he needs to win. That helps him with his base. And unfortunately, whether we like it or not, that attitude has trickled its way down and infected and metastasized within the Republican Party and the conservative movement in general. You need only look at this loser right here, Marco Rubio, for proof of that. Marco Rubio is a senator from Florida. He ran against Donald Trump in the 2016 presidential election, lost to him, obviously. And he's done, like Lindsey Graham, like Ted Cruz, like so many others, a 180 on Donald Trump. So he went on the Fox propaganda network yesterday during as Trump's arraignment was taking place, or while Trump was en route to the arraignment in Miami, and Marco Rubio demonstrated just a disgusting and casual hypocrisy that I want to unpack because it's really, really, really fun to pick on these Republican leaders, and hopefully this will help inform moderate centrist people who, again, are kind of on the fence and are not quite persuaded that the GOP is infinitely worse than the Democratic Party. People who claim to be animated by principle and just see this as a both sides issue. Hopefully this video and this combination of words will persuade you. So let's take a look and we will unpack.
These documents of this nature don't belong at Biden's garage. They don't belong in Hillary Clinton's server. They don't belong at Mar-a-Lago. But there's no allegation here. Even if you read the indictment, nowhere does it say, and as a result, the national security of the United States was harmed in this way, okay? And you have to weigh that with an indictment that now is going to put our country in a deep, already divided and polarized country in a really dangerous place. Because now all of our institutions are being undermined. Now the whole country, we're watching this spectacle play out on television, and it will for the next year and a half. Not to mention, there's real questions about whether the president can get a fair shake here. I mean, what lawyer licensed to practice in the Southern District of Florida, works at a firm whose clients aren't going to complain if he signs up the president, can get the clearance to do a national security, and is actually a good lawyer. How hard is that going to be to find to begin with, if you think about it? Then this thing will drag out, see what comes from that as a result. Meanwhile, and I talk about it in my book that just came out, China is all over the world undermining us, and we're fighting with each other about stuff like this that should never have been brought. And so I just think this is a sad and terrible day. I know there's people in the press that are giddy about it, Democrats and partisans that are giddy about it. But this is really bad for America, this indictment. It was a bad decision to bring it. I don't think it was justified or merited. And we're going to pay a terrible...
So there you have it from Marco Rubio. And I know what you're thinking. Damn, he must have had the same exact position when it came to Hillary Clinton. Well, you would be wrong. So I want to show you some screenshots here. Provided by Aaron Rupar. This was Marco Rubio, July 5th, almost a year to the day, nearly, on Twitter. The FBI's decision regarding Hillary Clinton's mishandling of classified emails once again proves that she is disqualified from being commander-in-chief. This idea that, she engaged recklessly with the private server in her home and the retention, or excuse me, the fact that the private server had some classified documents, improperly classified, by the way, ambiguously documented, ambiguously marked, denoted classified emails, but the fact that she had them at all it disqualified her, in Marco Rubio's estimation, from being the president of the United States. So it's a pretty harsh standard, but okay. Is that your standard when it comes to Donald Trump? Ugh. Now, in June 2023, the DOJ is seeking to jail for life not just a former president, but the leading opponent of the current president in the 2024 election. The damage this is already inflicting on our country far outweighs the damage, if any, from what they allege from the indictment. See, here's the thing. During the Hillary Clinton situation, there were no credible allegations that Hillary Clinton's possession of classified documents was in any way dangerous to national security. Nobody ever made that claim, and certainly never came close to being credibly proven or even insinuated, but it was enough to disqualify her. Meanwhile, Donald Trump, we found the documents. There are hundreds of them. The indictment goes into vivid detail. He also obstructed justice and prevented the return of those documents. It's okay for Donald Trump to do that. That doesn't disqualify him. And as a matter of fact, it's divisive and dangerous to try to hold him accountable. That's the sad thing here. This is the party of law and order. This is the party that says that, listen, you have to take personal accountability. If you do the crime, you got to do the time. No lenience. You owe a debt to society, except when it's somebody they like. Except when it's one of their own. Then it's okay. And then actually, you're being divisive for wanting to hold that person accountable. They would never have taken the stance, and they didn't take the stance when it came to a Democrat, Hillary Clinton. They wanted her prosecuted. They wanted her indicted. They wanted her convicted. And even the insinuation of inappropriate behavior, in their estimation, disqualified her. It's an asymmetry of expectation. Marco Rubio is basically confronting the fact that he can't refute the indictment. He can't credibly make the case that the indictment isn't serious. He can't defend Donald Trump's actions. So instead, no, he doesn't say Donald Trump was justified in doing what he's doing, or he didn't comment on it at all. Instead, he pivoted. Well, listen, you have to consider the greater good, the harm it does to the country. Well, you all didn't care about that when it came to, again, making claims about the person who at the time, Hillary Clinton, was the leading Democratic candidate for the office of the presidency. You didn't care, but now you care. Well, I don't see why we should. I think that your standard in 2016 should be the same standard the Democrats apply here in 2023. I think Democrats should be willing to ruthlessly pursue this to the very end and not show you a mercy that you were unwilling to show Democrats. This is the thing. Republicans are graded on a curve in this country by so many. We've covered this in so many videos. They're graded on a curve by Republicans, often by Democrats, often by the media, often by independents and centrists. We have to stop that. Donald Trump, based on the indictment, did some really terrible things, and he'll have his day in court. By the way, when Marco Rubio says that, Donald Trump, what's the guarantee that Trump can even get a fair trial? The trial will occur in Florida, Trump territory, and at least initially it will be presided over by a Trump-appointed judge who, in previous rulings, has ruled generously in favor of Trump. So generously, in fact, that her conservative superiors in the 11th Circuit Court said, lady, you are being ridiculous here. You are being far too generous. You are interjecting your own weird, unsubstantiated judicial interpretation to bend the situation in favor of Donald Trump. That's how good this man has it, plus the fact that the prosecution is the higher burden. They have to persuade a jury unanimously to accept the charges beyond all reasonable doubt. So Donald Trump is far from disadvantaged in this situation. But Marco Rubio doesn't care, because at the end of the day, he, like most other Republican leaders, is a hypocrite. And you need to remember that.